Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cosmic Egg. And as you know, this show is not timid about bringing on controversial issues. This week we have rather interesting information to share with you and a very, very controversial figure. His name is Vladimir Terziski, and he is here joining us to impart on us an awful lot of information. So Vladimir, welcome, and I'm very glad that you managed to make it.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Now, Vladimir, I've looked at your credits and I'm terribly impressed. In fact, looking at what you've done in terms of education, I'm really surprised. Here you have a Bachelor of Science in Physics, you have a Master of Science in Electronics, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. You have brought on to me an awful lot of information about about Nazi Germany and the technology that they had in the 40s. Now, I am absolutely astounded by the information that you have to share with us. You have brought on pictures. Could you please tell us about these pictures and what they actually are telling us?
Well, in one sentence, while researching UFOs in general and the terrestrial component of the alien presence in particular, namely secret terrestrial programs that have been dealing with anti-gravity and secret space programs for the last almost 100 years, I realized that a lot of these secret projects are covered up behind the alien smokescreen, and later on laundered to the general public as an alien technology gift to us. And in order to pull the carpet from under the feet of the government, or let's call it the party line American ufology, I've been doing research on Nazi UFOs, on the 50 or more basically different models of crap that the Germans built before and during the Second World War, powered by every engine that was in production in Germany at that time, by piston engines, Wankel engines, turbojet engines, ramjet, pulse jets, rocket engines, and the final and most advanced models were powered by electromagnetogravitic drives. These are the most, basically no moving part drives. But in order to convince someone that this massive research and development conspiracy, let's call it, and this secret space program run by the Germans has been on for all these years. Actually, the persistent rumors are that the Germans landed on the moon and Mars before the war ended. And later they were followed by many other secret programs, but we will talk about that probably in a future show. The Russians and the Americans landed on the moon and Mars in the late 40s and early 50s respectively. An Italian team landed on Mars in 56. Many superpowers have been actively pursuing secret space programs based on anti-gravity propulsion. But in order to convince someone of the existence of this massive research and development conspiracy, one first has to be convinced of the existence of political and economic conspiracies in this world. Here I have few little books that are probably the best introduction into the field of economic conspiracies. None there called Conspiracy and the Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin. One of the best books on the New World Order conspiracies and secret government projects is Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse. There isn't much time for further political conspiratorial introduction, but behind the political conspiracies are the scientific conspiracies, or the secret sciences of the hermetic societies and brotherhoods that for thousands of years have been practicing endeavors that are considered science fiction by the general public. This is a book about flying devices built in India 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. In my research, bibliographic research, I have a vast collection of several hundred books on this topic, and these are some of the most interesting ones relating particularly to German secret weapons.
Okay, so in this book that you just brought on, you talk about Germany already. Does this actually mention that Germany, before the Second World War, being involved in very, very advanced technology?
Yes, actually these books mention a lot of extremely bizarre, almost science fiction military technologies. And the first book that mentions particularly the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany is the book Intercept UFO, or Intercept But Don't Shoot, by Renato Vesco.
Now, Renato Vesco, was he part of the Mussolini government?
Renato Vesco was actually a very leading figure in the Italian research and development effort. He was the research and development boss of the Italian Air Force. He may not have been a Werner von Braun, but he definitely was an extremely brilliant scientist and engineer. And besides that, Italians and Japanese were regularly briefed on all secret German developments during the war. So after the war, when he wrote the book, he knew exactly what he was writing about. Actually, he wrote and discussed in great detail the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany. This is the turbojet-powered flying saucer built by Schriever, diameter of about 30 feet. And the joint project, this was the first operational interceptor fighter saucer that was built by Belonzo, Miete, and Schriever. A very interesting fictional history of the German flying saucer effort are these two books by Harbinson, Inception and Genesis, written as documental fiction, but in my opinion they just show the basically the very first level of this tremendous research pyramid that happened in Germany. I have some photographs that were extremely rare to find. Many of these were pulled out of German libraries by our research associates and friends. Most of them are impossible to find in the United States. The third model that we talked about is a very interesting photograph done in 1952 over Mount Rainier in Washington State. And in my opinion, this is a flying Kugelblitz, or ball lightning, automatic anti-aircraft weapons platform that was captured by the Americans and test flown secretly from bases in the western United States and northwestern Canada. Later on, through German sources, we have discovered not only turbojet-powered craft, but these are rocket-powered craft with rocket engines of the V2 type. And the subsequent model of Miete, these two craft had an exoatmospheric capability, and they could easily go in orbit around the Earth. This is a very interesting drawing of a saucer type Dreadnought, a 60-yard diameter, this is about 200 feet diameter, interplanetary craft that has huge sleeping compartments. It is basically 10 stories tall. Drawings were published in Germany by a little secret society there.
What would have been the purpose of that Schriever flying disc here?
It had definitely an interplanetary objective, because a flying saucer that can circle the Earth in 1.5 hours does not need sleeping compartments. You don't have to sleep between your during your flight. Basically, the longest distance you can travel around the planet is 1-2 hours at the most.
Right.
So obviously sleeping compartments on such a massive scale would be needed only for a craft that would land on the moon, that would stay there for a long time and come back.
So you're actually saying that the Germans pre-World War II were refining the technology in order to actually travel to a different planet?
Exactly. These two models are capable of going in orbit around the Earth and probably going in an extended elliptical orbit toward the moon. This huge craft is capable of getting into orbit around the moon and landing on the planet. And These were actually the most primitive of the models that the Germans built. 2 months ago, I received, through some private channels, a secret documentary film made by the German secret society, the Thule Gesellschaft, something like an equivalent of the Illuminati society here. The title of this documentary, 2-hour documentary film, is UFOs, the Third Reich Strikes Back. This is the emblem of this secret society. They were basically the ideologues of the Third Reich. Talking too much about Germany, I would not like the discussion to be considered as an apology of the German success. What the Germans did to millions of hapless victims in World War II, I mean, they earned enough karma from themselves to last them for this and many subsequent lifetimes to come, for these of us that believe in karma. But once these things invented, they were shared later by the superpowers. They cannot be disinvented, to use Daniel Bell's interesting
One thought
expression.
keeps coming back to me, and that is almost world supremacy. I'm looking at this and I'm going, what's the incentive? What's the reasoning behind trying to refine such technology?
Well, it gives man an ability to go to the moon, to explore the planets of the solar system, to go beyond the solar system. Some of these larger crafts were definitely able to go beyond the solar system, as we shall see very soon. The first row of photographs, actually this is a very small part, this is maybe a third of all the documentary photographs shown in the German documentary video. These are interceptor fighter craft of the Vril series that have never been written about in any other source in the world literature so far. They were about 30 feet in diameter and extremely maneuverable. Their speed was almost 3 times the speed of sound. For them, Allied bombers and fighters were basically sitting ducks. Renato Vesco, in his book, depicts about 3 dozen attacks of flying saucers on Allied bomber formations with devastating consequences, and these all were attacks of the previous and more primitive craft. These craft were developed in the very last years of the war, 44, 45. This subsequent line here are the 25-meter diameter, which is about 75-meter diameter, 30 feet tall tank killers, the craft of the Honeybull type. We have never seen before UFOs with tank turrets attached underneath.
Oh yeah.
We see different models of tank turrets. Actually, these are standard issue turrets for the German Panther tank and the Panzervier tank. Later models developed in the 60s from the German colony on the South Pole, which is another very controversial issue. Admiral Byrd led an expedition to the South Pole in '47, trying to wipe out the Germans, but he was beaten very badly. In just 2.5 weeks he had to leave the continent because the Germans had perfected all these craft. On the bottom row we have the most interesting examples here. This is an original drawing of a cigar-shaped mothership of 330 feet length that was carrying inside itself one of the tank killer craft and 3 of the interceptor fighter saucers.
So how big was this cigar-shaped
It
craft?
was about 90 to 100 feet in diameter and 330, 350 feet length. This is a football field size craft. The most interesting, and this could be photographs of German crafts in flight well after the end of the World War, probably flown from their base on the South Pole.
In what year was that, approximately?
These photographs were taken 42, these are and 43, these are 44 and 45. These were taken after the war. The drawings date from 1943. The biggest craft that the Germans built was the 74-meter diameter. This is about 220 feet diameter flying saucer of the Honeybull 3 type. This is a naval warfare craft with, we can see here in these turrets, triple guns of a naval caliber, 3 turrets on the underbelly and a 4th turret on the top. This was a craft made for huge naval warfare. According to this film, the only craft was taken and flown from the Earth to Mars by a huge crew of basically volunteers and self-sacrificial crew of Germans and Japanese, and it landed on January 15, 1946. After 8 months of flight, they departed April 45, a month before the war ended in Germany, and they crash landed on Mars. The gravity field there is too weak, so the craft couldn't make it real nice in the landing. The most interesting things about this craft are that these are free energy devices. These are basically flying converters of gravitational energy that convert the energy of the geomagnetic field of Earth into the electromagnetic energy of flight. So these craft never had to tank. They never had to replenish their reservoirs. They had actually tapped into the inexhaustible reservoir of free gravitational energy of the planet. This is something even more taboo as a topic than the fact that the Germans developed all these 50 different models of craft. Because if one is able to go basically for free to the moon and Mars without using a single gram of fuel, free riding on the gravitational currents of our solar system, then a lot of our present-day economy about, well, we all have to pay for the fuel when we tank our cars, right, becomes obsolete.
So let's discuss this in much more depth. In your estimation, where is all this technology stored?
Well, Germans were not the first one to develop this technology. John Keely presented his anti-gravity flying bathtub, as if we may call it like this, a funny looking contraption. He sat on it, rose noiselessly, accelerated to a very fast speed, and came back and landed in front of the stunned eyes of the War Ministry here in the United States in the 1860s. They said, well, we can't find any possible use of this device.
Where was Nazi Germany? I mean, when did Nazi Germany actually come into play?
There are persistent rumors that the Germans were contacted by one extraterrestrial race, as have been all governments of all superpowers all throughout the terrestrial history. But that particular race was the cause of this tremendous explosion, this cornucopia of German killing machines and advanced weapons technologies that had absolutely no precursor whatsoever in previous terrestrial developments. So basically from the 20s and 30s, Germany was actively pursuing research in rocket propulsion, in anti-gravity propulsion, in free energy devices that were later combined with their flying saucers to make these formidable weapons. Later on, this technology was used by the secret powers, by Russians, by the superpowers, namely the Russians, the British, the Americans, the French. Even the rumors are that the Israelis and the Brazilians have their own anti-gravity craft in operation these days.
I have a question that's burning me. That question is, why didn't the Germans at the time when they were actually losing the war, why did they not actually throw all the technology that they had, such as this, and just as much as possible obliterate the enemy?
Oh, well, actually, we are getting here very deep into the political and banking conspiracies behind these wars. A war is not meant to obliterate the enemy. A war is meant to load the credit card of the government by forcing it to buy more armaments. If you obliterate the enemy, there wouldn't be any future enemy for the future war that is coming. Okay. So basically, all these wars have been orchestrated and choreographed by the same world banking elite that has been funding both sides in a conflict.
But in what way would that benefit Nazi Germany?
Well, actually, from the mid-30s, the Germans were actively involved in their South Polar research. From the late 30s, they started building their underground bases on the South Pole, and by 45, they have moved, according to some rumors, from a few 100,000 to up to 1 million of slave labor and Nazi scientists and SS officers down there in this huge underground colony that later on engaged in space exploration and genetic research. According to persistent rumors, basically all the genetic research going on in the underground labs these days in the United States has been started in Nazi Germany. I know a very good movie producer who was working on one UFO documentary, and he saw in a military base here in the United States a documentary film, 30-minute film about genetic research on humans, crossbreedings between humans and animals in Nazi Germany 50 years ago in the concentration camps. So the South Polar colony had primarily its goals in space exploration and genetic research. So basically the Germans were saving all these devices for the defense of the South Polar colony, which Admiral Byrd learned unexpectedly that they had made an impenetrable fortress there.
So why did we not find out about what happened to Admiral Byrd?
Well, there's an interesting interview in an Argentinian paper. He probably gave that on his way back from the South Pole before the security lid was clamped on him, where he said the next World War will be fought with an extremely powerful adversary that has the ability to fly from pole to pole. He was obviously talking about the German craft that obliterated his aviation. All his planes were shot down in less than 3 weeks. He came down with 3 carrier fleets with 3 formations of carriers and support craft and 4,000 troops, and was beaten in less than 3 weeks and hastily retreated from
After the Second World War, Nazi Germany, obviously after its defeat, was there a tacit agreement that they could keep that technology and refine it further? I'm surprised that...
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the Rothschilds and all the other European bankers have been financing for 300 years both sides in every conflict. And this is the best way for them to have the government load their credit cards, and so then to live off these enormous interest on these loans. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany was financed by basically the Wall Street and the American banking community and the European banking community, as was the Russian Bolshevik Revolution.
Are you saying that German bankers, namely some of the big families, were behind the revolution in Russia?
Well, the Russian Revolution was financed by Wall Street, by the Vatican, and by South African gold. It was financed, it was planned, financed, paid for, carried, and later on Wall Street helped Russia in the first 20 years of the most difficult 20s, basically in the 20s and 30s, by propping up the Russian economy. So what happened to the German South Polar colony? I think that Admiral Byrd probably concluded the first tacit agreement or condominium agreement between the Americans and the Germans, namely that let's not interfere into each other's affairs. Maybe even we would do some trading. We would be trading with crude materials, raw materials, bolts, nuts, metal profiles, raw materials, and you would be giving us some of your astonishing technology. This is according to Renato Vesco in his book Intercept But Don't Shoot, and according to the book of Genesis.
These are fictionalized.
The second, yes, but this is a documentary, highly engineering, highly specialized report on the German anti-gravity research and development. I have a lot of information about secret collusion between the United States and Russia, all behind the smoke screen of the Cold War.
But Germany, what's Germany's involvement in the Cold War?
Official West Germany, very little. Basically, they were the strongest member of NATO. But the secret German colony on the South Pole was basically working hand in hand with the secret Soviet-American space program. It is rumored that when the Russians and Americans landed on a joint flight to the moon with a probably American-made saucer in the late 40s, not only that they discovered the German swastika flags already planted in the most famous craters on the moon, but they spent a few days as guests to the German ex-Nazi moon base.
Yeah. So you have so much information, it's staggering. In fact, I'm absolutely overwhelmed by all the information that you've managed to share with us in such short time. And I would like to be able to invite you for further shows where we can go much deeper into how all this Nazi German involvement came about and where it's really taking us to ultimately.
Actually, I have several videos that I've been selling for the last 1 year. Any one of the viewers that are interested in obtaining more detailed information and lengthy bibliographies, I have a bibliography that runs into the hundreds of volumes.
We will have
detailed bibliography. From that phone number at the end of the show, they can order some of these videos. I'll be making some new ones. Basically, it's a very interesting collection of documentary films and materials.
Wonderful. But I'm really glad that you actually came today to share all this information with us, and I hope that we will go much deeper next time into all of this
Next
stuff.
time I would like to talk about the secret Russian-American space programs, the landing on the moon in the late 40s, the landing on Mars in the early 50s. I even think that I have a documentary footage of the first joint landing on Mars. The film says that it was made in '62. I have a suspicion that it was way back in '52. A saucer landing by the two superpowers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on the Cosmic Egg. And please write in, send us your comments, give us your suggestions, and thank you again for joining us on this show. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.